command POCs with contact. All right, so who are the points of contact and what are their contact information, right? And so are they using their personal cell phone? Are they using a department issued cell phone? How can you get a hold of them? Are they using email in some way? Are they using Teams? So what are the ways that you can get in contact with folks? And maybe even if it's radio, what radio channel are they assigned to? What are the pending resource requests? So are we still waiting to get confirmation on that resource is gonna come or be available? Maps, that's always changing, right? So a lot of places now you've got a specific GIS person assigned to the incident in the EOC. I know on the teams out in the field, you guys do that. We're starting to do that in EOCs also. They usually wrap up underneath the information folks and ITS folks and be able to do that. Sometimes they've got printers on location, they can print for you. Sometimes they're just displaying the information up on the wall in your EOC. And then always, what does the current and future weather look like? Because that's going to impact our ability to be able to do things. All right, who's familiar with community lifelines? Right on. Who wants to give us an example of what community lifelines are and what they're for? Chris has got his hand up. He still had his hand up. What? You moved your hand too slow, brother?
Too slow. Basically, it's so we don't forget things that we may not think about. It's a list of things that natural disasters or whatever can affect. So it's to remind us to make sure that we're covering all the things that can affect maybe things that aren't in our forefront of thinking.
Absolutely. So we get very into what it is we're trying to do. We're trying to meet those objectives, trying to stop the flow of the bad stuff, and we start to forget that there's cascading effects that are going to impact the community. And so especially at the EOC level, right, that's kind of our job, is to start thinking about that stuff so incident command that's dealing with the situation doesn't have to deal with those. And so exactly right, we're looking at things like safety and security. Is the scene safe? Have we evacuated? Are people allowed to come back into the area, or are they not? How are we going to prevent them from coming back into the area if they've been evacuated? Food, water, and sheltering, right? So are we setting up a shelter operation? We look at what's going on back east right now. You could have a shelter set up, but there's no critical infrastructure, transportation. How are people even going to get there? So I was watching a video the other day. These miners from West Virginia showed up with their equipment down there in North Carolina. They said, we heard y'all need to get that road redone. And they just started clearing that road from Bat Cave to Chimney Rock. And just started cleaning out the debris, laid down a flat surface so you can at least get, what's that?
I know what that is.
Oh, do you? Oh my God, I've not been there, but I've seen the pictures of the devastation. Because that one whole side of the road is just gone. It's in the river now. It's just gone. And so these guys came down. They just started pushing everything off to the side. They started laying down a foundation for a roadway. It's not anything overly complicated. It's basically at this point just a really nice hard packed flat dirt roadway, but at least now you can move vehicles through there. So those are the types of things that we're talking about, is how are we going to keep those things going so that we can not only manage the incident but be able to take care of our community throughout this incident. Yes, ma'am.
So I was working in Iowa during the 2020 derecho show, and it really impacted a lot of the lifelines. And so it was basically a land hurricane and an unprecedented event that they couldn't map out, and there was no time, so there was no warning to the public for it.
Right.
So we were reporting on it on the news, while it was happening, and telling people it's here now, get in your basements. And that's when the National Weather Service was finding out. That's when EMS was finding out that the storm was here. It ripped out 80% of the tree canopy and all of the cell service. So what emergency management found out was they didn't have a plan to communicate with the cell service down.
Right.
And so, and then we couldn't get information to the public from the news side, because obviously we can't broadcast if there's no power, and there was 2 to 4 weeks for some people without power. We had to have agencies from all over the country come to help restore the power, so that was a huge failure to all of the lifelines, and a lot of people got fired because of it, because there was no plan for if this happened.
Yeah, because, and that's part of it too, is I know when we do exercises, right, and we try to drive activity, and people are like, oh, you always give us the doomsday exercise, right? It's so unmanageable. It's never going to happen that way, and blah 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 blah. But Mike, when we're working for DOC, if I had done an exercise where I said, hey, we're going to lose 25 power poles at an institution and take power down, and the live wire is going to go across the Sallyport, what would have happened?
They'd have said, oh, no, we won't do that.
Yeah.
That'll never happen.
That'll never happen.
Except it
But
did.
it did.
Except it did, except when it did, right?
Yeah.
And then that's always my argument, is at that point, that's the level you have to prepare for, because now it has happened. So if that happens and something more, how are you going to prepare for that? Because if you don't have capacity to meet a real world that did happen, and granted, maybe it's a once in a lifetime, once in 100 years, whatever, but our job, while we're in it, is to make sure that our community is going to be prepared for that level now, because it's happened. And so it can be challenging because it's never happened before, and nobody really foresaw that type of devastation, and we're seeing that now on the East Coast. Whereas if we'd have been the ones that cried wolf, right, and said we should prepare for this, we'd get laughed out, and maybe even laughed out of our jobs.
We did say it.
Yeah.
And we got laughed out.
And we got laughed out on it.
Well, in
So-
Hawaii too, you saw the same thing happen with their fire.
Right.
People like jumping in the water, and then people got fired.
Yep.
from it.
So that's what the lifelines are. It helps us refocus on what it is that we need to be looking on to make sure that the community is being taken care of as we're responding to the incident. So here's some sample EOC information. What is the current activation level, personnel assigned? What are the essential elements of information like we talked about? What is that task tracker for current status? Did we cover that? I'm sorry, I got distracted, okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
And we covered the EEIs, they just, that exercise.
Okay.
Taking data, information, making intelligence, and getting those EEIs up to.
Okay, thank you. The EOC logs for when events and decisions were made, that's really important. So one of the things I do when I first open up my EOC, if I don't have a whiteboard, I put the easel pads up there, and I just start writing times for everything, right? Until I can get a scribe in there and start documenting that process. That becomes part of my original documentation. Even if I transferred that onto ICS forms or other information, I'll still I'll take pictures if it's on a whiteboard, and if it's on one of these easel pads, I'll take that down and I put that as part of my original documentation into my folders. Because if I ever have to replicate that, right, I'm a visual person, I'll remember visually what I saw, but if I don't have it, then I can't talk to it. So I like to have those, be able to put them back up, recreate it so that we can use that information. Mike?
I don't mean to go backwards, but task tracker, you were talking about that, is that the status of the incident or the status of the tasks associated? You said the EOC task tracker, and I guess that's something I'm not familiar with.
So-
We covered something else, but not specifically task tracking.
So there is, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head because I have a copy of it, but there is an ICS form, and I have it on the enlarged laminated, and it actually says task tracker on it.
215A, I think.
Is that,
Liaison officers.
No, A is the safety analysis.
No.
There's additional tasks.
so there's an actual form that you can put, what are the open tasks, what are the status of the task, has the task been taken care of and closed?
Okay.
And that's what
It's an
the
ICS
log,
form.
activity
Yeah.
log in Web EOC did, and I think Teams does the same thing, but I have to get into Teams and see how that lays out, so. Just- do you want-
233
You know
CG,
anything
Incident
about
Open
that?
Action Tracker.
Yeah.
What is it?
From what I'm seeing.
233 CG.
233C, something, yeah.
Oh, it's Coast Guard.
Why can't they just call them what they are?
Is
Oh,
it-
Brian.
It's a Coast Guard.
Incident Open Action.
Please refer to the fact book.
233.
Coast Guard has done a lot of stuff like that.
Incident
What's it called?
tracker, no.
Incident Open Action Tracker.
233 G.
Is it a ICS?
ICS 233
233 CG.
CG.
Sorry to open that up.
There it is.
Now you lost your screen.
ICS form 233, Charlie Golf.
I got a purpose for you.
And each section, like I have mine for PIO, like the liaisons have one for theirs. I know at the EOC level, that's at the IMT level, at the EOC level, I know in Web EOC, we had a track, and it had, yellow, green, yellow, red.
For the stats.
Yeah.
For stats, yeah.
Going on.
Yeah, so I saw that form, again, because I'm bringing in university personnel who this is not their day-to-day thing. And so I wanna give them tools, right, to help them understand what it is that they should be doing. So that was one of the ones I got as a laminate, so I can put it up there and they can start looking at the different tasks that are being assigned out and how they can be tracked.
Sorry to.
Maps are always good. For your jurisdiction, so again, in my EOC, I've got large maps of the campus itself, and then some maps that I can pull up of the Flagstaff area if it starts to spill over into the city itself. And then your declarations, and then we talked about media reporting and inquiries regarding the incident. So when I worked as a PIO and an EOC, I've got a log of contacts. I know who contacted me or who I contacted, what it is that I gave them in terms of information, because that becomes important when you're trying to reconstruct some stuff, right? Because they always want to do the blame game. Well, who said what, when, how, and you're able to say, I told them this information, I did not tell them that information. This is the time that I told them. So, questions to ask yourself: is the information I'm providing relevant and timely? Do we get information that's irrelevant?
Yes.
Yes, we do. Do we get information that is no longer timely?
Yes.
Yeah. What's an example of not getting something that's no longer timely?
A weather report for yesterday.
Weather report for yesterday, yeah?
Hurricane hit. Last year's election results.
Last year's election results. So you might get stuff where it's not relevant at that point in time because that action's already been taken, that task has already been accomplished, or the situation has changed, or those management action points have now changed because the outskirts of the fire or the flood have now changed. Is the development of the action plan based on the SIT picture required or necessary? Is the development of an action plan based on the SIT picture required?
So with the information that you're getting.
So with the information that you're getting,
You need to adjust.
You need to
your plan.
adjust.
do you need to adjust?
For Kentucky windage.
Okay, sounds good to me. Does the information help in maintaining situational awareness for others who depend on the EOC? So what are some examples of some others that might be dependent on that information?
The state EOC.
State EOC, right? Who else?
The NAC
Lucky
group.
ones, and the policy group.
Yeah, the NAC
Your
group.
policy groups, right? Your elected officials,
PIOs.
PIOs. Anybody else? The public itself, right, in general. That's probably one of the biggest challenges, and I know we've talked about that with social media, is the public is getting information from irrelevant sources, right? I heard you guys talking about that. What's that one that's your vein of existence?
Arizona Weather Force, if any of you follow that guy, please just stop.
All right.
It's the same guy from 2007.
Hey, I'm Brett Russo, and it looks like clear skies out, but it looks like Maricopa County's gonna flood badly.
So then you're fighting the disinformation, the wrong information, right? Because you've got people out there that are putting stuff out, doing their own thing, and that's a real challenge with social media nowadays. So managing that shared situational picture, it's based on how your EOC's organizational structure. So who manages the situational picture? Your SIT unit rep, right? So what are the things that you're doing to manage that?
Pulling people's ears.
Pulling people's ears?
Check in, making sure that, just cause I got something 10 minutes ago doesn't mean it's accurate anymore, so.
Okay.
Staying up to date, if I'm using live sources, I can track that easier. If I'm using static sources, finding out who collected that information, when it was collected, those are very important, because if it's an unaccredited person, then you can't use that, especially if they receive.
Okay.
And then I bug my operations chief and operations section for any information that they can provide me. at least coming from the state, we get a lot of information from them as well.
So when you say bug him for information like operational updates, where are they at? Have they met objectives? Have the objectives changed? Okay.
Quick question. What is a static source?
So a static source versus a dynamic source or a live source. For my maps, for the fires that I have on there, on my perimeter, the fire perimeter, is a live source. It automatically updates. It will update on a regular schedule. A static map is, if I make a map of Goodyear right now, it's out of date. 10 minutes from now, right? It's static, it doesn't change. That's like a paper map is a static map, or a static source. A newspaper is a static source. Things like that.
Alright. So process for continuous, situational awareness monitoring, so like you're talking about your live sources, talking to people who are actually doing the work, what is the update, where are you at with things? Process cycle for picture updates, so tell us a little bit about what your process cycle might be.
It depends on like the incident, I guess, so I'll go with fires, cause that's what we deal with most of the time. We, like I mentioned before, we use those 209s, if they get updated, they should get updated every day, they don't always get updated every day, it's upsetting. So we'll track those changes basically on the 24-hour cycle, but we also, I use watch duty, and I get updates on that at random different times. I've gotten up out of bed to update the dashboard because of watch duty. I check with my operations, I check with Bush to make sure that it's actually true.
Right.
But, so it just depends on the development of the situations or incidents. There's a lot of things are not gonna change much, but fires, if they contain them, it's pretty much, they're gonna burn, the acreage will go up or whatever.
Right.
But the actual footprint doesn't, right? So, just different, just depends on the dynamics. I don't know. I tried to make up a word right there.
You knew it was headed.
It was there.
Right on.
How dynamic the situation is.
Right on. Right, and of course, all that, it intersects with EOC planning, right? Because the EOC needs to support the intent, so they need the most up-to-date situational awareness of what it is that's going on, so that they can make sure that they're being able to provide the support that's needed. So it's really important that you have those types of communications and conversations like you're talking about. So mapping EOC communications, information management. So talked about all those different areas where you're getting information from. You talked about getting them from operations, you're also getting from logistics, what's the status of the resources, where are they at, what does that logistics, what does that on scene look like? Your suppliers, hey, where's that stuff I ordered, how far out is it, how soon can I expect it, kind of thing. Other local agencies, because sometimes you're working the same event, but you're not necessarily in a unified sense doing it, right? Because the tornado is gone, but you have widespread devastation. So how are you coordinating, like maybe with those commercial suppliers, to get the stuff that you need? Because you're all going to the same backup, and you've got a limited amount of resources. So sometimes it might be coordination, right? This jurisdiction's gonna have these resources today. When we're done and we've met these objectives, we'll release those resources to come to this jurisdiction here. So all that information management and then feeding that up to the EOC, whether it's the local, state, EOC, so that they know what it is that's going on. Talk about your state counterparts over there. So just a little bit about how that communications process works, who's involved in that, and where you're getting stuff from. Questions on what we got going on up there? No? Okay. So we're back to our planning P. Include identifiable times for publications of sit reps, when you're doing briefings, when you're gonna do key updates. We talked about considering the EOC synchronization with the operational cycle for incident command, because incident commands initially they may be working for 4 hours before the EOC gets stood up, or maybe 8 hours. So the EOC may go to, you know what, our initial is gonna be 14 hours, so that way we can sync with incident command, or a lot of times EOCs are maybe during the daylight hours in the evening, and then they just have a watch person on at night so that they can get in sync with the incident command the next morning. Why is it important to try to sync with what incident command's doing? Why do you want to get on the same type of schedule? Why do you want to synchronize that?
So you can be as useful as possible to the incident.
You don't miss their meetings, that you can make your other meetings, around that, I mean, it's just logical.
Yeah.
The needs have to line up.
So know when the coffee is brewed.
And the donuts are fresh.
Alright, activity 5.2, shared situational picture. You guys have that in your book? Can someone shout off what page that's on? Manual?
219.
219.
The actual activity.
For the couple ladies in the bathroom, it's
231.
flooding in there, so I think they're closing the bathroom, I just let them know, so.
Which
I
band?
didn't do it.
Alright, so this is where we get into incident complexity, complex incident, etc., etc. So we're familiar with the type 5 incidents, right? So, 5 type of incidents. So type 5, usually managed very quickly, local resources, usually short duration, usually not multi-operational. That type 4 starts to get a little more complex, might be multi-operational, and then type 3. That's most of our local stuff that we end up doing and working with those partners, especially initially. And then we talked about it starts to get more complex, and how's that EOC going to staff for that or manage that. When we start talking about something above the type 3, that's when we're starting to talk about something more than just your mutual aid, more than just your initial resources. That's when we start looking at, hey, is there a type 2 team that can come in and manage the incident? Is there a type 1 team if it expands, especially like we have out here with wildfires? How many organizations around here have an actual type 3 team to manage stuff? A dedicated type 3 team? You guys have one at Avondale? Okay, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I would say it's kind of a skeleton crew, if anything, but we do have a lot of open books. Emergency manager Aaron Glass he has all of his credentials that he needs, but getting all of us credentialed has been a challenge for sure.
Okay.
And then if something happens, taking us from our regular day-to-day activities and plugging us in.
Right.
We don't, like Brian was talking about, we don't have those positions filled, we don't have a 3D,
Right.
which would be awesome, but we just don't have those.
So is it a type 3 all hazards
Yes.
team as opposed to a wildfire centric?
Yes.
Okay, so it's designed to, hey, if something hits in Avondale, we can at least assemble some folks that have some knowledge, may or may not be credentialed, and we can function as a type 3 team to try to manage this, unless we need to bring in a higher team to take it over.
Yes, he's done a really good job incorporating other city partners.
Okay,
And
good.
We talk a lot about PIO here, he's got 3 people in the city that are, getting versed in the incident management stuff, which is impressive.
And that's great, because I think one of the challenges is, right, everybody thinks that it's gonna be a police or fire thing, right? And a lot of times, these incidents aren't police or fire centric at all, right? It becomes something like, we're the initial responders because we're the ones that pick up the phone when somebody calls 911, and we get there like, this